Tonight, in an exclusive interview, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warns of catastrophe if the US and Israel attack its nuclear facilities.
This is really crazy. And this would turn the whole region into a very bad disaster.
3 cities a week, up to 1,500 arrests a day. The Trump administration lays out what it expects from immigration raids. One among hundreds of thousands, we join a woman's journey to what's left of her home in northern Gaza. Also ahead, questions about American dominance in AI after a low-cost Chinese firm turns the tech world upside down. Good evening. Iran has, for the past 15 months, been at the center of world-changing events that have weakened its power and influence. Conflict with Israel has left its important Middle East allies, Hamas and Hezbollah, defeated and fractured. And now Iran's arch-nemesis, Donald Trump, is back in the White House. Still, the country has a somber warning for the US and Israel delivered by the Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, in an exclusive interview with Sky's international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn. They sat down in Tehran and began with what Mr. Araghchi described as American threats.
We, of course, do not respond to the language of threats. This is a fact, and we have proved it in the past. But we do respond to the language of respect.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because on the one hand, Donald Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal that took so long to negotiate, and he's done things that have been very hostile to Iran. But at the moment now, he's saying a deal with Iran would be nice, to use his words. So Donald Trump appears to want to move on. Is Iran prepared to move on as well and negotiate with America under his presidency?
I'm not denying the possibility of a new deal or a new round of negotiations, but I want to refer you to a fact that we have now much more mistrust compared to the previous time.
But he is now saying he wants a deal, and a deal would be nice if he approaches you with respect.
No, I'm not
negotiate.
No, I'm not rejecting that. I want to say that now there is much more mistrust between us. And we have to overcome that mistrust first. And there should be enough confidence for Iran to once again engage into negotiations. And I think we are still a bit far from that. As I said, we are waiting to hear. Yes, have a deal is nice, of course, but what kind of a deal?
The whole region, the whole world knows this region is in turmoil. And they know the heart of the tensions are Iran's relationship with America, those tensions that go back so long. And they're waiting to see, is there a glimmer of hope from what you're hearing from the new president, that some kind of discussions are possible?
Well, diplomacy is based on hopes. So we never lose our hope for any diplomatic effort and for any initiative. We had this experience in the past. We were able to resolve these difficult questions through diplomacy, and that experience can be repeated. But again, the situation is different and much more difficult than previous time. Lots of things should be done by the other side to buy our confidence.
So you're not ruling it out, but you want to hear a lot more from Donald Trump and his government?
Of course, we haven't heard anything but the nice word, and this is obviously not enough.
You said towards the end of last year, we believe the window for diplomacy is still open, albeit for a short time, provided the other parties demonstrate genuine willingness. Without such commitment, we will pursue an alternative course. Now, that has caused concern in the West. Can you explain what do you mean by an alternative course? Because many people say it means Iran possibly pulling out of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. Is that what you meant?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know what would be the alternative. But I can explain. And I think you would understand that we tried the path of negotiations and confidence building in our peaceful nuclear program. but then it turned into a bad experience. Sanctions came back. So what is that alternative? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know, because it is under consideration. It is, and I have to be honest with you, there is a hot debate going on in Iran about that alternative. Yes, there are debates, and debates are very hot at all levels, even in the streets among ordinary people.
But in government, what are people saying? You've got some people saying pursue diplomacy, and the others, what are they saying?
There are different points of view. There are different points of view. I don't know which one would prevail at the end, but the debate is going on. But on October, we would come to the point that we have to make a decision. This is why I told you that October this year could be a point of crisis, and we have to avoid that.
Before we move on, just to clarify, you are prepared to give Donald Trump a chance, at least to listen to what he has to say?
Yeah, of course.
And if he says the right things and approaches with respect, you will talk with Donald Trump?
Then we will decide.
If he says the right things, then you will negotiate with America?
Well, as I told you, we will decide. I'm not telling you that we would reject whatever he says.
You won't rule it out?
Of course, we will consider that, and we will discuss about that. We have always made rational decisions. We have proved that.
Can we move on to Israel? We've heard from Israel's foreign minister saying there's been no better time for Israel to strike Iran. Iran's at its weakest. And Donald Trump has said he's prepared to support Israel in that if a deal can't be done. How worried are you by that prospect?
Well, this is not a new threat. And they know that this is not a real threat because they know our capabilities to respond. And we have made it clear that any attack to our nuclear facilities would be faced with an immediate and decisive response. But I don't think they will do that crazy thing. This is really crazy. And this would turn the whole region into a very bad disaster. I don't even want to talk about that. Why? Because I think this is not a real threat.
And on that subject, on the subject of Israel, the Palestinians and Gaza, Donald Trump yesterday said that one option could be cleaning out Gaza. He proposed that, and the Palestinians moving somewhere else. Is that a red line for Iran? I mean, if that was to happen, what would Iran do?
Well, I think this is a project many people tried to do in the past, but they have all failed. You know, Palestine cannot be deleted from this region, and Palestinians cannot be expelled. So my suggestion is something else. Instead of Palestinians, try to expel Israelis. Take them to Greenland, so they can kill two birds with one stone. So they can resolve the problem in Greenland and Israelis. So it would be a good place for them.
You don't think the Israelis have a right to live in what they regard as their homeland?
Well, everybody has the right to live, but nobody has the right to occupy others' lands. And this is the land of Palestinians, and Palestinians should decide for their land and their destiny.
In the last year, we've seen Hamas weakened, we've seen Hezbollah massively weakened, we've seen the death of Hassan Nasrallah, a close ally of Iran's, we've seen Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, assassinated here in this very city. We've seen your ally Bashar al-Assad toppled from power. Is it fair to say that your strategy is just not working, that you need to have a complete rethink about how you operate in the region?
Well, I don't think so. These are quite, things which happen in the world,
Things that happen? I mean, surely you must admit that you've lost a lot this year. You've lost allies who've been assassinated. You've seen allies thrown from power by Sunni jihadi enemies of Iran. Will you concede that things have not moved in Iran's way this last year?
So can I answer this in Farsi?
I believe that the resistance has been rendered several serious blows, but we have to know that resistance is a school of thought. It is a cause that is still alive, and it is still there and is breathing. That is true. Hamas and Hezbollah have been damaged, but at the same time, they are rebuilding themselves. And because, as I said, this is a school of thought, this is an idea, this is a cause, this is an ideal that will always be there.
Let's go live to Dominic now in Tehran. And Dominic, it's relatively rare for members of the Iranian government to give interviews. Why do you think the foreign minister is speaking now?
I think two words can answer that, Barbara: Donald and Trump. This is a man back in the White House who has been an archenemy of Iran. He's somebody who assassinated in a reckless way in their minds one of their great heroes, Qasem Soleimani. He's a man who was unreliable. He ripped up America's signature on the Iranian nuclear deal, and he is back in the White House at a time when Iran is at its weakest, the weakest it's been for years. It's seen Hamas and Hezbollah, its allies and proxies, decimated, very badly weakened. It's seen leaders, allies like Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, and Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, assassinated, and Bashar al-Assad toppled by Iran's enemies. But it also hears from Donald Trump, as well as a sense of menace, saying that he might have to support Israel attacking its nuclear facilities with military force. They also hear from Donald Trump this talk of a deal, the idea, he says, that a deal with Iran would be nice. So it's something they can't afford to ignore. And interestingly, tonight, the Supreme Leader, or earlier today, an Iranian religious holiday, addressing top officials, military and civilian, said this. He said, "Behind the smiles of diplomacy, there are always hidden and malicious enmities and resentments. We must open our eyes and be careful with whom we're dealing and trading and talking with." So on the one hand, he's saying be very careful going into negotiations, but he is there explicitly accepting that negotiations will have to happen, even with the devil, as they regard Donald Trump. And there's another reason why Iranians have to hope for a rapprochement with the West, even if it means talking to Donald Trump, and that is the economy, which is on its knees. Inflation at 50%, youth unemployment at 20%. The currency has dropped to the lowest level it's been for a long time this week. And if you talk to Iranians, many of them won't go on camera, but the few that we're able to persuade to talk today and yesterday on camera in the bazaars of Tehran, they won't talk about politics, but they will talk about the state of the economy and how depressed it's making them all.
I can say that about the inflation. We can see that day by day the prices goes up, and unfortunately it's not good news. And all young generation, they're worried about this situation.
Economy is day by day is getting worse and worse for us, and working in Iran is going harder and hard situations.
So those are the thoughts and the mood of many people we spoke to in Tehran. Many of them won't go on camera, but they will say that those who will go on camera, that they are depressed, that they feel that prices are shooting up all the time, rocketing, and those who are educated enough are simply trying to leave the country. And that is a ticking time bomb. If you add it to the unrest that we saw in the wake of Mahsa Amini's death in custody and the huge amount of protests that we saw a couple of years ago, that's under control for now. But I think the economic pressure is enormous. And of course, that's something that Donald Trump and the Americans can make worse by increasing sanctions. So there is an acceptance, I think, that negotiations are inevitable. But there is a real sense, I think, about Iranian officials that they need to enter those talks in a way that is acceptable to them, given what the Americans did the first time around, simply walking away. So there's a huge amount of confidence building and trust to be restored before there's any real hope of meaningful diplomatic progress.
Dominic Waghorn with the latest from Tehran with that interview. Well, from Tehran, let's go to Washington. And our correspondent Mark Stone is at the White House. Mark, we were just hearing from Dominic. Donald Trump, of course, behind that interview. So how do you think these remarks by Iran's top diplomat are likely to be received at the White House?
Well, I think the White House, although they haven't spoken publicly about Iran today, and Donald Trump, they will see this as Iran sitting up and listening. I mean, I was struck in Dominic's interview by the careful language that the Iranian foreign minister used, and the fact he wanted to switch to Farsi at certain points, choosing his language very, very carefully. I think there is no question, as Dom said, Donald Trump. Those are the two words that explain why this interview has happened now. And he believes, the White House, the administration believes, that not just Iran, but many countries, most countries around the world, that they can't quite work out how Donald Trump is going to operate. They do know that diplomacy under a Trump administration is going to be wholly different. And so, you know, they need to choose their words carefully. And so he'll be pleased, I think, that the Iranians appear to be willing on certain terms to have some dialogue. That said, it is also quite clear that Donald Trump wants to deal with Iran in one way or another. And next week, he is going to have a man here in the White House who is going to tell him that the only way to deal with Iran is to take out their nuclear facilities. And that man is Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who will be the first foreign leader to visit Washington since Donald Trump took power. We've learnt today that an invitation has been extended by Trump to Netanyahu, inviting him here. And the letter says we will look forward to discussing how we can bring peace to Israel and its neighbours and efforts to counter our shared adversaries. That shared adversary is Iran. So let's see how things progress over the course of the next week, and that meeting next week will be absolutely key. Iran was not discussed today at the first press briefing from Caroline Leavitt, the youngest press secretary ever in the White House, someone who took to the podium today in a packed press room, a room that I have never seen so full. You literally could not move in there, that there were so many journalists wanting to get their questions in. It was the first opportunity to be able to scrutinise the whirlwind week, just over a week we've had since President Trump took office. And she did her best to counter questions about all sorts of things. But I think for me, it wasn't the content of her briefing, it was the tone. She carried herself with such extraordinary, remarkable, notable confidence. And we've seen that not just with her, but throughout the administration here. They seem absolutely buoyed by their win. They seem supremely confident in their mandate, as they would see it, to fundamentally change America, change the federal system, change the way that diplomacy is done. We saw it with Colombia over the course of the weekend, Colombia rejecting immigrants that Trump sent back there. Trump then put massive tariffs on Colombia, and lo and behold, Colombia backed down. This is the new world that countries around the world are going to have to deal with. And a key focus of the press briefing was the controversial stuff, so controversial as some would see it, around immigration and kicking out those that the Trump administration believes to be illegal.
Immigration, obviously, a key part, a key focus of the Trump administration. Mark Stone at the White House for the moment. Thank you. Well, Chicago yesterday, New York today, Aurora in Colorado tomorrow. These are the first three American cities being targeted in quota-driven immigration raids, which are expected to round up and arrest up to 1,500 people a day. The officers involved have spoken of having a new sense of mission, but those fearing deportation dread what a knock at the door will bring. From Chicago, our U.S. correspondent James Matthews reports.
Look at Chicago. It looks a little different under Donald Trump. Go to the south side and the streets are more empty than usual. There's a reason for that. They're calling Chicago ground zero for migrant arrests, a city targeted first in Trump's deportation drive.
It's never this quiet. Usually people are always walking up and down.
In this Hispanic neighborhood, they tell the migrant story of a community kept indoors and of streets emptied. People retreating to the shadows for fear of what they're calling here collateral arrest.
My mom, she's scared to come out, and if anything, if she does get deported and everything, it's gonna be really hard.
She's just scared to go out there. She has more anxiety going out there. It's like like I was saying, that she might get picked up somewhere else from work or around where we're living.
They don't normally keep the gates shut at this migrant support centre.
We're noticing pickup trucks. They're using a lot of different cars that you can't tell whether or not they're, ICE agents, whether they're, police.
This is an open house for immigrants in the area, but immigration raids have altered the routine. Here we met Oliver. He came to America from Venezuela, has a work permit, and has been working in construction, not currently.
There are rumors about migrants, and I'm scared that they might catch me, deport me. My family depends on me.
Here in New York City this morning, we are getting the dirt bags off these streets.
This was Kristi Noem, America's new Secretary of Homeland Security. She joined a migrant raid in New York. They are expanding the map. US immigration enforcement has been publishing totals for the arrests that they're making. The figures are up on the daily average during Joe Biden's final year. It's the measure that matters in government by numbers. It is applauded by much of America, the crackdown and its choreography. Not so much in the community's centre stage.
Let's go live to James now. James, Donald Trump was always very clear about his stance on migration. So what reaction has there been now that the policy is being implemented?
Fear, anxiety, I think, Barbara, in these communities that I visited today, Hispanic areas of the south side of Chicago, where they have had raids and where neighbours of these individuals have been deported. And, I went to this migrant community centre where they're taken care of, and it has changed lifestyles. In that particular place, people are told, if you're driving here, go into the car park, don't get out your car until we close the door. They do recces around the building to look for undercover police, undercover ICE agents, and people are staying indoors. You heard it in my report. One man in that report talking about his 48-year-old mother, who decades ago came to the United States without paperwork. She remains indoors without paperwork, doesn't want to go outside because she may be tapped on the shoulder. So you literally have streets far emptier than they normally are, and with the individuals, residents, communities, wondering where this is going to end and how this is going to end for them. Because right now, of course, Donald Trump, immigration enforcement, is targeting migrant criminals. But there are these collateral arrests who are almost picked up accidentally and deported. And of course, there will be further phases along the line where enforcement runs deeper than merely criminals. So there's no doubt Donald Trump feels he is getting a result. The figures would seem to bear that out. They're publishing daily figures. 969 today, Barbara, in case you were interested, posted by ICE, the immigration enforcement agency. And they point out that the numbers right now are higher than the daily average for Joe Biden in his final year. So the numbers are adding up to success on the flagship policy. And right now, that works for Donald Trump. And it must be said, it works for much of America who have long wrestled with this issue of immigration and what to do about it. Much support for Donald Trump's actions, not just amongst Republicans.
James Matthews in Chicago for us. James, thank you. And don't forget that Sky News has a new podcast. It's called Trump 100, and it tracks the president's first days in office. Scan the QR code to listen. Mark Stone and James Matthews speak to Arab Americans who backed Donald Trump last November and ask where they stand now after the president suggested that Gaza be, quote, cleaned out and sent Palestinians to Jordan and Egypt. That's Trump 100. You're watching The World, still to come. It's the technology that promises to change everything, but in the past few days, it seems everything has changed for AI. And also ahead, we'll follow the journey of a woman returning to the rubble of her now unrecognizable home in northern Gaza. Stay with us.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Lough Neagh. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
President Trump has described it as a wake-up call for American AI firms, although it's been more of a rude shock. A little-known Chinese startup called DeepSeek has shaken the world's assumption that America dominates AI with an app that's just as powerful as the best of Silicon Valley. Well, tonight the White House said it's evaluating the national security implications. Our science and technology editor explains.
DeepSeek's AI app was developed at a fraction of the cost, runs significantly faster and gives just as good answers as its rivals. And to top it all, it's free. The whale logo is apt because it's created one hell of a splash.
The release of DeepSeek AI from a Chinese company should be a wake-up call for our industries that we need to be laser-focused on competing to win.
A little awkward given just last week, Mr. Trump was flanked by OpenAI and other key tech figures launching a $500 billion supercomputer venture they promise is the route to AI supremacy. US AI dominance, so their pitch goes, requires ever-increasing computing power using state-of-the-art chips made by American firms like NVIDIA. But DeepSeek suggests there are other routes to better AI, and certainly cheaper ones.
What we've seen is a monopolization of the debate by people who are not
creators of this technology, they're tech CEOs. And their only aim is to increase the value of their company, increase its market reach, or protect its existing market reach. And that's been very, very damaging.
So questions then about the best path to more powerful AI and regulation too. Little over a year ago, governments met to address AI safety. Big tech firms were reluctant to let them control their models. Not an issue in China, it seems. Early users of DeepSeek have already pointed out that it seems quite lost for words when asked politically sensitive questions. So is it censoring content? One way to find out is to ask it.
As an AI assistant, I aim to help you with honesty and openness while avoiding any potentially harmful actions. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to provide useful information and engage in in-depth discussions.
Well, I think that's effectively admitting that it does. But the other thing about DeepSeek is it's an open source AI model, and developers in the West have already shown it's possible to remove any censorship features. The key concern in the US, though, is whether they can defend their supposed AI dominance.
The model that we've seen before, where the US innovates and China replicates, is here again in the context of AI. And both the US and China have cast AI as this real fulcrum of competition, geopolitical competition between the two. And so China now has come along and said, hey, we're just as good as you are in this space that you've invested billions of dollars in, and we did it at a fraction of the cost.
DeepSeek and China have shaken things up, but these are early days for AI. You don't need a super intelligence to predict more surprises to come. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Let's get more on this with the editor-at-large of TechCrunch, Mike Butcher. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. OK, we're hearing some of the details there. How much of a game changer do you think this is?
It's turning out to be a massive game changer. Silicon Valley bet the house on using lots and lots of chips, microchips called GPUs, and then lots of energy to crowbar artificial intelligence systems for us to use on our phones and in businesses. And in fact, actually what DeepSeek has proven is that they just need to improve the software model, the underlying architecture of the software, to create a bigger game changer where you just do away with all of the power and the chips that are needed. Not all of them, but for almost over half the amount of energy and hardware required.
Does this change the assumption then that I guess most people had, that Silicon Valley was going to be the home, the continued home of AI? And if so, how does that change the balance of power, if you will?
Well, DeepSeek has proven that other countries can work on AI models that are at least as efficient, at least as good as anything that Silicon Valley can come up with. And it means that countries such as the UK, France, Germany, outside the US, have a much better chance of creating what they call sovereign AI, and their companies can do better as well. And so it has very big implications. Effectively democratizes access to artificial intelligence. I
mean, Donald Trump used quite strong language. He called it a wake-up call for American firms. Obviously, it had an enormous financial impact. But there's another impact as well, security implications. We kind of always go back to China. Similar argument, not the same, that we've been having about TikTok. What do you make of the security implications of this?
Well, there's no avoiding it. There are clear security implications. When you use DeepSeek on your phone, for instance, you're sending your data, the information, straight back to China, straight to China's servers. Do not pass go, do not stop anywhere. Let's go straight there. The irony, of course, is that the US had huge problems with TikTok because of its association with China, and now there's an app that's top of the App Store that contacts directly with China. So there's a lot of security implications. Obviously, also, it's highly censored, so it won't talk about Tiananmen Square, the massacre in Tiananmen Square. It won't talk about the Uyghurs. There are ways to get around it, but very different, but more technical ways. So the average person would not see that information on DeepSeek.
Yeah, I mean, they're very vague on anything to do with human rights, alleged human rights abuses by China. You mentioned that this opens up the possibility of, more European AI outfits, British ones as well. How realistic and how imminent do you think that could be?
It's very early days, but many people are talking about this moment as the Sputnik moment, when the gun was fired on the space race in the 1950s and 60s. It's a way of looking about artificial intelligence as something that almost any country could now produce in the way that we've seen US and Silicon Valley firms have produced.
It's quite a divisive thing, because I know some people that use AI all the time. I have to say it might be an age thing, but I know a lot of people who don't use it at all. How do you think that this development will change the way that normal people use AI?
It's certainly going to mean more opportunity to access it. Different kinds of apps will probably be appearing in the next few weeks and months. You can use DeepSeek right now if you want to, and you can kick the tires on it if you want to. Just be aware of the security concerns. But it's probably going to be a proliferation of new services. Let 1,000 flowers bloom, I believe, was the phrase, and that's what's going to happen.
We'll see. Mike Butcher, editor-at-large of TechCrunch, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Barbara Serra. Still to come. No safe place to run. We'll hear from our Africa correspondent, Yusrael Bagir, in eastern Congo's largest city, Goma, now overrun by rebels.
more police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they make almost 100 arrests.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Aid workers say there is no safe place to run for people trying to escape Goma, the city in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo that's fallen to rebels. Well, the UN has maintained a peacekeeping force in the Central African country for more than 2 decades, most recently focused on the rebel group M23, which the UN and others say is backed by Rwanda. M23 is one of about 100 armed groups fighting for a region containing trillions of dollars in mineral wealth. Over the last few years, they've established more and more control, displacing hundreds of thousands of people. Then they rapidly advanced in January, capturing the key eastern Congolese towns of Minova and Masisi. Now, M23 rebels have captured Goma, a hub for trade and shelter for people who have fled fighting elsewhere. The surge of violence has killed at least 13 peacekeepers during the past week alone. Our Africa correspondent Yusra Bagir is in Goma. Here's some of her reporting over recent days.
Is M23 planning to capture Goma?
Yes.
How soon?
He's going to protect the people.
A solemn walk of surrender. Congolese soldiers laying down arms in a city now captured by the rebels they were trained to fight.
We're trying to see as much as we can while seeking shelter. There's ongoing fighting in the streets as M23 cleans it block by block, trying to cement their control. And in the distance on the road, you can see uniforms laid out on the road in surrender, not just by Congolese forces, but also the hundreds of foreign mercenaries fighting alongside them.
Soldiers have fled too, now in the hands of their neighbor Rwanda, who are backing the rebels that chased them out.
Is this an all-out war?
No, it isn't. It isn't. We are just taking all necessary defensive measures to protect the population living along the border. And we will continue to play our role, our primary role of protecting the territorial integrity of Rwanda.
Well, let's go live now to Yusra, who is in Goma for us. Yusra, do you get the sense that the rebels are consolidating their control of Goma now?
I mean, there definitely feels like a sense of entrenchment. They spent yesterday cementing their control, moving block to block and quelling defense from Congolese forces who wanted to hold on to the city in their country. It does feel now that there's a calm. It's less violent physically, but there is a psychological toll that people are experiencing here. There's definitely a sense of deep uncertainty. They have said they want to set up a local authority. We're expecting to get a statement from them tomorrow morning. But in that time, the way things have been changing moment to moment, there's definitely a feeling that anything may happen. This morning, a ceasefire was being brokered. People were attempting to bring the two sides to the table. That failed. Fighting was ongoing. The airport was being captured by M23 as senior UN officials and diplomats were trying to broker that ceasefire. The latest death toll is 100 people killed in just 3 days of fighting, their 3-day capture of Goma, nearly 1,000 wounded. We've been told that patients were killed in the crossfire as they were seeking treatment. There's so much has happened in such a short period of time. And what it represents to Congolese people played out in the streets of DRC's capital, Kinshasa. People took to the streets fuming, furious, attacking embassies, attacking Western embassies, setting fire to facilities outside of the French embassy, saying that the Western world has enabled this. They see this as a Rwandan invasion. Rwanda has long backed M23. The reports of Rwandan troops entering Goma the day of the M23 incursion is supported by data from UN experts saying that there are 3,000 to 5,000 Rwandan troops in the DRC at the end of last year. So people see this as a Rwandan invasion. They don't think M23 could have made it this far without Rwandan support. And the West is putting a lot of pressure on Rwanda's President Paul Kagame to pull back. But it seems like there's a digging in of heels here. There doesn't seem to be any change. There have been 2 UN Security Council meetings on this in 3 days, one on Sunday and one today. We've seen the US condemn Rwanda quite heavily. Trump's new administration coming out full force, calling on Rwanda to withdraw, saying they respect the sovereignty of the DRC. And also Trump's Secretary of State, Mark Rubio, speaking to DRC's president and telling him that they condemn what Rwanda has done. So all of that still hasn't changed the fact that M23 is now in full control of Goma. We're waiting to hear more from them, but that is what we know for sure.
Really painting there a picture of the instability and fear in the city there. Yusra Bagir in Goma, in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, which is now being run by rebels. Yusra, for the moment, thank you. And a little earlier, I spoke to Rose Chwenko, the country director for the DRC with the humanitarian organization Mercy Corps. Rose was forced to escape when fighting intensified, and I began by asking her how the situation unfolded.
For weeks, they had been fighting on the periphery of the city, and there were clear signs that they were advancing, approaching the airport and other strategic points in Goma. And as per policy, we had to move non-nationals out. Since last Thursday, we actually had asked our national staff to go into hibernation, giving them resources to get supplies, and because of the imminent danger. And by the time I left on Sunday, a couple of hours later, the fighting intensified. We moved across the border to Gisenyi in Rwanda, and on Monday morning had to move further inland because the fighting was spilling over across the border into Gisenyi.
And many of your colleagues, the ones who are nationals of the Democratic Republic of Congo, have stayed there in Goma. Are you in touch with them? And if so, what are they telling you about the situation in Goma and, of course, the desperate humanitarian need there?
They have stayed. And we were in touch, regular contact until about 2 p.m. yesterday, when I think communications and internet was cut. So even the ability to charge phones and be able to communicate outside is really difficult within Goma. So it really, one of the most distressing things for me is that since 2 p.m. yesterday, we have not been able to contact various members of our teams, and we are just praying that they are safe. But what we knew before 2 p.m. was that it was really intense. The experience I experienced at Gisenyi at the border before we started to move in, and if that was any indication with the shells and the bombs and the gunfire flying overhead, we just imagine how much worse it is in Goma.
A desperate situation, incredibly dangerous. And of course, that's why so many people are fleeing. And the people in that part of the DRC have been displaced several times, actually, over the past few years. Do you have any current understanding of the kind of needs that those people would have, and who is there to help and support them? Because a lot of other agencies like you have had to evacuate many of their staff.
Yes. We do have a really dedicated team of partners, Mercy Corps staff in the country. As of this morning, I know that at least one of our partners was still managing to provide water and sanitation services in some of the IDP camps outside of Goma. And we still have teams throughout the country, in South Kivu, in other parts of North Kivu, where the conflict has been raging for the past 3 weeks, who continue to deploy, providing cash transfers and other support to the affected people. But you're right. You know, I have been in Goma literally less than 2 weeks, having arrived newly in this role, and the devastation, the children on the streets, homeless, the number of injured people who are begging for help. You cannot approach any major commercial center without people approaching you seeking help. So you can see the devastation of this prolonged conflict on everywhere you turn around in Goma.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Katie Spencer, and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent.
I'm Lisa Dowd, and I'm one of Sky's Midlands correspondents. The reason I do this job is because you never know where it's going to lead.
Migrants risk their lives climbing aboard these trains in search of a dream, the United States.
It's really dangerous. They often get robbed on this train.
They suffer a lot by police, cartels.
What happens to them next, we just don't know. Do you miss your mum?
With Trump coming to the presidency, how much longer will people be accommodated?
The journey you've been through, it's been very difficult at times. Has it been worth it?
See. This is a journey which goes by one name, the Beast.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
A lot of action going on. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Sunday, exclusively on Peacock, with the top of the Premier League still unsettled.
This duo have been in a league of their own.
Two clubs desperately scramble to climb the table.
The blockbuster fixture.
Arsenal.
Just what Arsenal needed.
Manchester City.
Chance for Haaland. Goal for Haaland.
This is the Premier League. Sunday, 11:30 Eastern, only on Peacock.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back to The World. Now, with Gaza's ceasefire fragile but holding, hundreds of thousands of people are returning to what's left of their homes. Sky's Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports now on some of their painful journeys.
The massive movement of Palestinians back to northern Gaza is continuing. Hundreds of thousands have made the journey now, it's estimated, on foot, in cars, or by donkey and cart. What they're returning to is this: total destruction. A grey wasteland where the only thing that has survived are the memories of life before the war. But it's home, and it's better than the squalid camps that they've been forced to live in for months.
We're walking around now, and I don't recognize any of these streets. Where are we? We keep asking each other, where are we now? But it's fine. All that matters now is getting there.
Our team in Gaza went with Haneen back to her home in Jabalia, an area of northern Gaza that was the focus of very heavy fighting in recent months. She tried to stay. She didn't want to leave, but in the end was forced to move south. What she has returned to is scarcely believable.
I'm in a state of shock that I cannot translate. I'm unable to express my feelings. I'm shocked. You see here, this window, I used to put pots of basil and mint. Look at it today. What are we looking at? See that apartment there? All men living in that building were killed.
On her phone, Haneen has pictures of home before the war, of Ramadan feasts and happy times with family. Family members lost in the fighting, who will never sit round the dinner table together again. Finding clothes that had to be left behind in the rush to flee the guns and missiles is a brief moment to smile. And her daughter's toys, Mira's teddies, the little objects of innocence that might just help a young mind briefly forget horrors that will last now a lifetime. Aid is now surging into Gaza. In 1 week, double the amount of food that was delivered in the whole month of November last year, and it's making a difference.
What we look now in terms of what is the ceasefire window of opportunity, we maximize what we can get to ensure population are not facing shortages.
First came the ceasefire, and then the return home. A resumption of the fighting is unthinkable, but not unimaginable. The truce remains as fragile as life in Gaza itself. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
That's it for this edition of The World. Thanks for joining us. Stay with us. I'll be back in a moment with news at 10.